Welcome to first and only SaaS Talk Show featured on LinkedIn, and this is the Startup Edition episode where I cover founders and entrepreneurs making an impact in this world. And today's we're going to discuss combining the traditional startup hustle and grind with more strategy and planning. Bringing a clear strategy to the table can help startups transition from founders-led sales to hiring their first sales team. Joining us again today will be Anand Muralidaran from Iconic Mindset. If you're watching the show for the first time, be sure to check out our other episodes on our LinkedIn company page, and I'll leave a link to the SaaS Growth Ventures in the comments below. In a recent LinkedIn article, our guest Anand Muralidaran points out the absence of the visionary leaders in the investment and advisory ecosystem. This has led to a startup environment where everyone is focused on hustle and grind and not enough on strategy and long-term visions for the future. Anand insists that both hustle and strategy are necessary, but a strong strategy should be led your growth and revenue in a more predictable way. So how do you transition from hustle and grind to a strategy and planning? Well, let me break it down for you. First, switch your mind from traditional problem-solution pitch to a strategic narrative pitch. Instead of trying to push your customer's offering, try to pull the customers in. You need to attract customers to your offering. So how do you do this? It's quite simple. So you don't pitch and make claims about what your product can do. Instead, talk about old game versus the new game. In other words, demonstrate how your customer solved the problem the old way, and then show them how they can solve this problem the new way using your solution. That's it. Pitching and making promises does not establish the trust, but by presenting a narrative-driven context, you begin to establish the trust with the customer. Present the story of one of your customers' path, showing the old game versus the new game. Show that what the product that they used before, how they discovered you, and how they use your product today. And lastly, as part of your narrative, demonstrate ROI. Show how much time and money your customers saved using your solution. As a result, you build the trust by relating your customer's story and the success they achieved using your product and service. The bottom line is that you pull prospects to your product instead of hustling grinding. Stop hustling grinding. It's just simply not scalable, so why are you doing this? And you can't drive a Ferrari at the top speed with no GPS and your eyes wide shut. Here to talk more on the subject and share his experience is Anand Muralidaran. He is a founder and CEO at Iconic Mindset, where he works to bridge the gaps between B2B startups and enterprises, as well as the investors. Thank you so much for returning to the show, Anand. It's great to have you back.
Thank you, Artem, for having me.
Excellent.
It's a pleasure to be back to speak to you and your audience.
Please take a moment to introduce yourself for those who might have missed your first visit to the show.
Absolutely. So I'm Anand. I live in Silicon Valley along like Artem. 25 years in the industry. My secret power, like Artem likes to ask, is really a very unique and very close perspective and understanding of what do enterprise leaders do, how do they choose technology, why do they choose a technology, and what makes them choose company A, product A versus product B. I've been inside enterprises like an insider for 25 years. I'm talking about really large global enterprises. And I started this mission of Iconic Mindset 3 years back, very close to 3 years now. And the founding purpose and the mission is to really give back that insight, knowledge, nuance, and strategy to hungry startups that actually solve a great problem in really helping them build a great finding the right market and building the great go-to-market and the messaging so they can increase their probability of success and relevance in the marketplace. In that pursuit, on the other end of the spectrum, we do help enterprises as well with their innovation and transformation journey. Even before COVID, a lot of enterprises were in the middle of very deep and long drawn transformation programs. And COVID has just accelerated that for almost every enterprise on this planet. So excited to work with enterprises to accelerate innovation, startups to do their better product and go to market strategy, and hopefully bridge the two so that the need for innovation in enterprises is met by the creativity and the disruption that happens in startups. That's the humble mission we are on, Autumn.
Great. Thanks, Anand. Now, let's jump right into today's topic of strategies and startup success. I really like your analogy about some startups being too much hustle and not enough strategy. So, why so many young startups failing? How do we bring focus back to the strategy and planning?
Yeah, great question, Autumn, even to kick it off, because I think there's this common popular notion that strategy is only for big Fortune 500,000 corporates and conglomerates. And if you are a startup, you just have to hustle and grind. It's been kind of seeded over decades, if not centuries, since the beginning of Silicon Valley back to the semiconductor days of Fairchild and whatnot. So a lot of founders carry that muscle memory that, and even beyond the founders, the ecosystem, they carry the muscle memory that if I am a startup, I shouldn't be sitting and drawing a blueprint and a strategy and whatnot. I just have to go hit the market, build the product, hit the market, build the product, hit the market, iterate the product, hit the market, is how they look at it. And that, to me, will not work because enterprise leaders, as I spoke in the previous episode that we did, I think episode 8, where I talked about a lot of strategy around what do enterprise leaders need to really put the trust and buy a solution. So it really begins with founders, investors, and even board members, Autumn, truly understanding and appreciating the very strategic and critical need of having a strategy before we start hustling and grinding. To me, hustling and grinding is inevitable, but between two players, one without a strategy, just purely hustling and grinding, and another with a core strategy, hustling and grinding, the difference is going to be extremely obvious on the second player who has a core strategy and hustling and grinding within the cycles they are doing. Their chances of growth are much, much higher. And speaking of the strategy and whatnot, going all the way back to Abe Lincoln, he said it really best. He said, if someone can give me 6 hours to cut a tree, he said he will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. He didn't say, I'm going to carry the axe, whatever shape and form it is, I'm going to start cutting it. So I think that's a very strong message that the founders, and not just the founders, the investors and the board members and the ecosystem has to realize and stop really promoting and giving an Hollywood effect to founders who speak about hustle and grind and not about strategy, because it's not so cool and sexy to talk about strategy and planning and blueprinting, especially when you talk, startups. But that's got to change. And when the ecosystem starts, communicating the fact that hustling and grinding is more like an outlier, and everybody cannot. Outliers are purely, few percentage points on the both ends of the spectrum. So if you want to be in the middle, and if you want to increase your growth probability, you got to have someone outside of the company build a strategy, vet the strategy, challenge you, play devil's advocate, and then you go execute it. Your chances are higher, your probability is higher, and that's what I would recommend.
Excellent. So let's talk for a moment now about discovering different long-term strategy options. A recent Harvard Business Review article offered a great strategy development tool that outlines at least 4 different paths for startups to consider. And I'm sure some startups can envision more options or less. So as young startups seek advisory help and begin to consider different paths, do you have any advice on how to choose? Should the startup focus on most profitable path or the one that best aligns with their original inspiration?
Yeah, great question. Again, there's no silver bullet here, Artem, obviously, right? Because you got to really, you